This is the OTB Television Network, a service of Capital District Offtrack Betting.
Broadcasting live from the Capital OTB studios, this is Racing Across America with Seth Merrow.
Good morning. Welcome to Racing Across America on this Saturday morning. I'm Seth Merrow. Happy to have you on board. Let me alert you that today here at the Clubhouse Racebook, holiday grab bag. Swing down, put your name in the hat, and you get a chance to potentially pick a prize from under the tree. Holiday grab bag promotion today. Clubhouse Racebook, 711 Central Avenue in Albany. We'd love to see you down here, not only to maybe get an extra present for the holidays, but also to play some racing, and you can watch all the football action as well. That happens Sunday, but don't forget this time of year there are some NFL games on Saturday, bowl games as well, so you can watch all of that on Saturday. And then Sunday, an NFL Sunday, certainly come on down, watch all the football action, enjoy all the racing action here at the Clubhouse Racebook, 711 Central Avenue in Albany. All right, let's get right into it because we have a big show. Taped a couple of interviews yesterday, Friday. One of them was in John White out on the West Coast. Obviously, Saturday morning would be an early start for him, so got him yesterday afternoon to kind of preview opening day at Santa Anita. John White, the morning line odds maker, handicapper out at Santa Anita. We went through 6 very nice stakes on a 7-race stakes card. One of them is a little ungraded stake, though, so we concentrated on the graded stakes action with John. That's all coming up a little bit later on. But first up, trainer Mike Trombetta. He has a couple of Stronach tracks today, stakes laden. Nice stakes over at Laurel, nice stakes down at Gulfstream, and obviously opening day out at Santa Anita, great stakes action. And don't forget, speaking of Santa Anita, OTB Live this afternoon. We'll kick off probably a little bit later than usual, not much, but we will extend later. I'm going to go, usually we step out 4:30. We'll go to about 6:30 today, which will take us through the entire Santa Anita Stakes card. So again, OTB Live this afternoon. We'll have a little bit of a concentration on that opening day at Santa Anita. Keep that in mind. But again, some nice stakes at Laurel. Trainer Mike Trombetta has a couple there. Nice stakes at Gulfstream. Trainer Mike Trombetta has a couple there, so we'll talk about those horses. But also, coming up on Wednesday in New York, Mike Trombetta has one of the 2-year-olds that got some buzz the latter part of the season, Independence Hall. That one aiming for the 3-year-old debut New Year's Day in New York in the Jerome. So we talk about that with Mike Trombetta as well. So up next, trainer Mike Trombetta. Happy to be joined now by trainer Mike Trombetta. A couple in at Laurel on a big stakes day, a couple in down at Gulfstream on Saturday afternoon in stakes as well. And coming up, one of the buzz 2-year-olds of 2019 when the page turns on Wednesday. First 3-year-old stakes race of the year in New York, the Jerome. Independence Hall coming up as well. We'll hit on all those. Mike, good morning.
Good morning.
Happy to have you on board to talk some of this action. Before we get into that, I'm just curious because, again, you have some horses at Laurel and some horses at Gulfstream, Aqueduct on Wednesday. Do you consider Fair Hill your base of operations? And this time of year, are you there?
Yeah. Well, this time of year it feels like I'm everywhere, but Fair Hill is definitely houses probably the most that we have in one single place. And then, we have some other operations going as well. But that's certainly the one that I guess I would call home.
And we talk to Fair Hill trainers every once in a while, but for folks who maybe are new, just remind people, Fair Hill, Obviously, it's a nice central location on the East Coast that allows you to go to many different tracks. But talk about the facility itself and the different training options you have there.
Well, it's a lovely facility. It's a private facility. It's on state-owned property. So all the barn owners there own their barns, and we work out of there. And it's exactly what you said. You can go to many different areas to run pretty conveniently. So it's located very well. As far as the track, we have a synthetic surface, we have a tapetum surface to train on, as well as dirt. And then it's a little bit of a crossover between the racetrack and the farm. We have paddocks for our horses, round pens for the horses, and weather permitting, we can actually even ride them. There's thousands of acres of open field space. So if you have certain horses that need to be unwound a little bit and relax, you can take them out and ride them, give them a little different look at, as far as scenery and things like that.
Yeah, every once in a while I see pictures on Twitter of that kind of a situation. I'd love to get down and visit because, as I say, we talk to trainers that are based there occasionally, and it seems like really a nice facility. Let's talk about some of your runners coming up in the Saturday Stakes. Again, some nice stakes at Laurel, some nice stakes at Gulfstream, and let's start out at Laurel in the Gin Talking. This is for 2-year-old fillies. You're going to have Bella Aurora. We're going to go back and look at her allowance optional claiming win on November 2nd. Bella Aurora is going to be the number 7 horse. This was the first try on dirt. She had made 4 starts on turf, had run very well on turf, moved over to the dirt last time and had this big win. How'd she come out of this race last time, the optional claimer, and how is she coming into the Gin Talking on Saturday?
She's coming into the race well, and she had a little trouble in that trip on the dirt. She had to kind of wait for room, but when the rail opened up a bit for her, she spurted right on through and was able to get the win. Nice filly, works good on the dirt, runs good on the grass. She seems to kind of handle whatever you throw at her. So it's nice to have them when they don't have to carry a track around with them.
Yeah, you clearly have plenty of options. Again, she's run well on the turf previously. Give me the nuts and bolts from the trainer side of things. Why did you start the career on the turf, and what made you move over to the dirt last time?
Well, there's a lot more turf options in the summertime,
sure.
and so we try to get an idea of what kind of horse we're going to have as soon as possible. So when they're training good on the dirt, that's we're going to have nothing but dirt for them all winter if we don't take them south. So we try to establish what kind of grass horse we're going to have before we run out of grass. And she was good enough to get stakes placing on the grass, so we stayed with it. And then obviously once November comes around, it starts to get pretty dicey up here in the north, and we tried her on the dirt. And if she would have run poorly, she'd already been on the farm. But being she runs so good, we figured we could run her on another start or two on the dirt, and before we maybe take a look at giving her a little rest.
Yeah, that was a pretty nice dirt experiment last time, and she looks pretty good in this field on Saturday. Let's take a look at the Native Dancer, also on the card at Laurel on Saturday. You have bonus points in there. For this one, I went back a little ways. I pulled up the John Campbell from earlier this year. Bonus points is going to be the number 10 horse in here. Nice gutsy performance, a neck win on that day. That was after running 5th in this race last year, coming out of a 5th place finish in the Dickie Small last time. How's bonus points coming in? And again, this is a horse that actually has a pretty good record over the Laurel Strip, 7 times in the exacta and 10 times racing at Laurel. So give me your thoughts on bonus points on Saturday.
He's a very nice horse. He I didn't train him when he was winning those stakes. Unfortunately, I was on the losing end in some of those races because I trained horses that he ran right on past us. So now that I do have him, I hope to find some of the good fortune and get him to the winner's circle. He didn't have much of a pace in the last race, and that really hurt him. I'm sure there'll be quite a bit more pace in this one.
Yeah, I'm looking at the fractions from the Richard Small, 50 and change, 116 and change. So you're looking for a little bit more to set things up for a better run. He's coming off the synthetic surface down at Fair Hill. What's the thought process to train him down there on the synthetic?
Well, this time of year, there's days where the dirt track is wet or
Sure.
something like that, and if he's scheduled to breeze, it's just easier to take him on over to the synthetic track because it's not as affected by much, as far as the weather and the water. So some of these horses you see coming out of Fair Hill and that have these synthetic work, it's just a matter of that particular day. That track was a little better.
All right, let's move down to Gulfstream on Saturday. Tropical Park Oaks. We are wrapping up the 3-year-old season, and these are 3-year-old fillies scheduled on the grass at 1 1/16. You have Super Escape for Mrs. Weber and Live Oak Plantation. I went back to La Lorgnette up at Woodbine. This is back in September, early in September. Super Escape is going to be the number 3 horse here. This was on synthetic. A couple of turf starts since then. But again, this was not only on the synthetic, it was at the 1 1/16 distance of the Tropical Park Oaks. Talk a little bit about Super Escape and the potential for her on Saturday.
It's a tough spot for, it's a very competitive spot, but I think she fits and belongs. The filly's one of my favorites. She's won on the dirt, the synthetic, and the turf, and I don't have too many of them in the inventory that can do that. So I think the last start against straight 3-year-olds, and she's been doing well. So I worked her on the turf a couple weeks ago. She worked really well. So I'm kind of looking forward to running her.
Yeah, 59 and change, as you say, a couple weeks ago on the Gulfstream Park turf. You also picked up Jose Ortiz to jump on board.
That doesn't hurt either.
And I wanted to ask you because, as I say, we watched the stakes race victory for her early in September up at Woodbine. And I looked up your stats, and going back to 2017, you had no starts at Woodbine. 2018, you started 10 times and won 3 races. This year, 24 starts, 8 wins, a nice 33% up there. And we were up on Queen's Plate weekend and watched you win the Grade 1 Highlander with Wet Your Whistle. What has drawn you to kind of become a little more of a player up at Woodbine this year?
Well, it's a lovely facility. It's really everything is done so well up there as far as racing goes. They've been very nice to us, and they have a huge stakes program with a lot of options. And between the turf and the synthetic, it just gives you some of these horses that are bred for turf that can do the synthetic. It gives you another option. So it's just definitely one of the places I take a look at. And, the horses leave my barn early in the morning, and they're up there by 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And, we usually train them a day over the track and run them the next day.
Yeah, I'm with you. The folks up on the media side as well, they treat folks very well, and it's a nice program. I'm curious, did you run over their new inner turf course at all this year?
Yeah, we did actually. We did have a couple runners. But, if there's a flaw in any of their courses, I've never seen it. One turf course is better than the next, and it's just a wonderful place to race a horse.
Yeah, and with the 2 turf courses, for folks who are into turf racing, most of us are, it's really become a special place. All right, let's move on to the Via Borghese on Saturday down at Gulfstream. You have My Sister Sledge in there. I'm going to pull up the All Brandy from Midsummer down at Laurel. My Sister Sledge is the number 7 horse here, wins by a chart margin of half a length. This is a few races back. She's up against it a little bit in here, but again, we're looking at a win within the recent starts. 2 starts back, a nice second in the Maryland Millions Lady. Last time out, she was in a stakes race up at Aqueduct. Does have a little bit of form over Gulfstream in the past. What are your thoughts on Saturday for My Sister Sledge?
She's going to have to really step up and to give it a big effort to hit the board in that race. But, I don't think it's out of reach for her. She's just one of those turf horses that, that are, because of weather and different circumstances, she didn't get to run a heck of a lot this year. So we figured we'd extend her season a little bit, run her once or twice at Gulfstream, and then, at that point we can probably give her a slight break and then get her geared right back up for springtime.
Very good. All right, let's move on to the midweek race down in New York. The Jerome, which again kicks off the 3-year-old season in New York, and you're going to have Independence Hall. I said at the top of the interview, one of the buzz 2-year-olds this year, obviously coming out of that nice win in the Nashua. We're going to take a look at that. Independence Hall is going to be the number 5 horse. Chart margin over 12 lengths victory. I pulled up Equibase, and I saw Independence Hall just worked out yesterday. down at Fair Hill. Talk a little bit about the workout, talk about how he came out of this Nashua and how he's coming into this week's Jerome.
He's training really good. We give him extra time because of the Nashua effort was so good. The owners thought it would be best to extend it, the calendar a little bit and give him some more time to get to this race. And, he seems to be thriving and doing well. Yesterday was his basically final little blowout for the race, and, we're looking forward to it. He's been doing really good.
How'd he look yesterday?
He looked great. We worked him on the synthetic a couple of times for the reason we talked about before. We had some rain and things like that, so we shifted him over to that track. But yesterday the conditions were perfect, so he got his final blowout on the dirt and should be ready to go.
And again, we're talking about Independence Hall coming out of that win in the Nashua, and it was really fairly soon after the Nashua. You and the team had kind of indicated what you've alluded to. You skipped the Remsen and aimed for this race on New Year's Day. Talk a little bit about that thought process and why you came out of the Nashua and waited for January 1st.
Well, I guess because it's a little bit of that anybody that plays looks at the numbers and all. There's a little bit of a bounce thing that you worry about. When a young horse, especially a young horse, that runs such a big effort in so early into its career, the assumption is that the next start there'll be some type of regression of some sort. And, the idea is if you give them more time, it's less risk of the regression. So that was pretty much the principles behind it. And, they just thought that running him back in whatever it was, 5 weeks to the Remsen might be pushing our luck a little bit. And we figured now's a great time to, let him continue what he's doing and get ready for what lies ahead.
Do you look at the sheets as part of your training regimen, and which sheets do you use?
We do. I look at the brown sheets or the Ragged sheets, and there's a whole bunch of different vehicles out there to look at. But it's, as soon as you start to think you got it figured out, there's something that comes along that surprises you. So, it's a tool. It's a tool in the box.
Entries tomorrow. Are you expecting Jose Ortiz back on board for midweek?
Yeah.
That's the game plan?
Yep.
And I wanted to also, I'm looking at the PPs here. Debut is down at Parks in a maiden special for $75,000. Why Parks? But I'm looking with $75,000, and I'm looking at the date. Was that Pennsylvania Derby Day? And typically the big days like that, you get a nice maiden special weight race to aim at. Was that the game plan?
Yeah, it was. It was the game. It wasn't so much the first. That was an added bonus. But what we were looking for is something further than 3/4 and shorter than 2 turns for his first start. So that kind of really limits the possibilities. And Parks had the maiden race, and and because it was on that day, it was pretty much a surefire thing to go, and that's what we targeted.
Yeah, 7 furlongs first time out. You went off the 7-5 favorite and won nicely that day. So 2 for 2 now, 2 nice daylight wins. I'm always curious, a horse like this that has shown that kind of talent, do you know immediately when they come in the barn, or does it take a while to figure it out when you have a horse like that? Or is it different with each horse?
It's different with each horse, but there's so many things that go into it, and you can kind of get a little bit of an idea that they might have a little bit more talent early on than the rest of the herd. But it takes time. It's until you get closer to racing, it's real hard to separate all these guys. But he was one that we certainly had our eye on right from the start.
And I know everybody likes to take it one race at a time, but I'm just wondering, you're launching the 3-year-old campaign on January 1st. I'm wondering if in the back of your mind, if you guys have a path planned out down at Fairgrounds or Oaklawn or Gulfstream or stay in New York, or are you just playing that by ear?
Well, in this business, we write a lot of things down, and it's best to use pencil because we erase a lot as well. We change plans, but hopefully, if this weekend goes well for him, or New Year's Day goes well, I would think we'll migrate south to to Florida, and then continue the rest of the winter training down there. And once you're down there, you have several choices that you can choose from.
Yeah, it's going to be a nice ride, I think, given what we've seen so far. Mike, we wish you certainly a lot of luck with the stakes action on Saturday, and again, coming up midweek with the 3-year-old debut for Independence Hall.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Mike Trombetta, trainer of Independence Hall, and again with some nice stakes runners on Saturday as well.
Wagering on horse racing just got a lot easier at Capital OTB with our newly designed state-of-the-art mobile wagering site. Everything you need is right here on one easy-to-navigate mobile platform. Set your favorite tracks, pick your horses, place your bets, all with a simple tap of the screen. Plus, you'll have access to Capital OTB TV for all our network programming. So log on to CapitalOTBBet.com and see just how easy wagering on horse racing can be.
Welcome to Albany County, an incredible destination to live, work, and play, with easy connections to more than a dozen cities from our vibrant modern airport. It's a short trip downtown to a hive of culture and amusement, from world-class shows at the newly renovated Times Union Center to reliving the past at the New York State Museum. From outdoor recreation to shopping to nightlife, Albany County has something for everyone. We'll see you soon.
Here's some exciting news from Capital OTB. Capital Offtrack Betting and the Rivers Casino have partnered to bring you the finest experience in wagering on all your favorite thoroughbred and harness tracks from right inside the casino. Our newest location is open daily and can be found at Vance Lick's Bar, offering live tellers, self-serve betting terminals, racing information kiosks, and all the amenities you come to expect from Capital OTB. See you at the Rivers Casino in Schenectady.
Where's the best place to find your favorite teams, your favorite food, daily drink specials, and wagering on live horse racing? Legends Field Sports Bar, 711 Central Avenue, Albany. Get your game on day or night with 75 flat-screen TVs, tournament-style pool tables, a private banquet room, and live horse racing. So if someone asks you, where's the best sports bar in the Capital Region? Tell them Legends Field Sports Bar, inside the Clubhouse Racebook, 711 Central Avenue, Albany.
Come on.
I want sales reports on my desk by Monday.
Whoops. My bad.
Love racing? RTN brings you every live simulcast on your home television, plus live video streaming and race replays on your PC and mobile devices. To order, visit rtn.tv. RTN, a breed apart.
Here in upstate New York, no one provides bettors with more wagering options than Capital OTB. Our network of branch and easy bet locations stretches from the mid-Hudson Valley all the way to the Canadian border and west to central New York. So whether you need to place a bet, fund your Capital Bets account, or watch the next big race, all the action is just around the corner. A full list of our branch and easy bet locations can be found online at CapitalOTB.com. Capital OTB, the better and most convenient choice for wagering in upstate New York.
Welcome back. Happy to be joined now by John White from Sant and Anita. Postponed opening day, typically the day after Christmas. That was Thursday, but with inclement weather in the area, they pushed things back to Saturday, so that works out well for us. Not only do we get to talk about a slew of stakes, but it's opening day out in Southern California. John, good morning.
Good morning, Seth. And yes, we've had a rough patch of weather. In fact, we've been making the national news. Interstate 5, just north of Los Angeles, has been a parking lot practically for a couple of days because of the bad weather. So I think Santa Anita actually made a prudent move in pushing back this opening and delaying it for a couple of days.
Yeah, I was watching the national news, not the national racing news, the national news, and Los Angeles has been featured this week because of that wet weather. And so certainly I think the right decision was made. But we're talking now on Friday. I looked at the weather. It looks like it's moderated out. What are the expectations for Saturday?
Looks like it's going to be absolutely beautiful for Saturday. we're very fortunate in that regard. And, of course, with it being a Saturday, the weekend, and another plus to the people actually here in the Los Angeles area that might be considering coming out to Santa Anita, it's a much better situation than the day after Christmas because there's a mall right next to Santa Anita, and traffic can be just horrendous trying to get into Santa Anita with people going to the mall to take their Christmas gifts back. So the fact that we're a little further away from Christmas actually is going to be a big plus for the people coming on out to Santa Anita for opening day.
Oh, yeah, nice. And traditionally, that's one of the bigger days out in Southern California, so things are going to work out very nicely. John, before we get into that, some of the stakes action, I always like to pull up and look at your online columns, and one stood out to me. I was kind of scrolling down, and I saw it a couple of weeks ago, but I wanted to ask you about it because I have asked people over the past couple of weeks their thoughts on this, and I think you're on the same page I am. Going back to the Kentucky Jockey Club, Tiz the Law was potentially sitting on an Eclipse Award-winning performance, but wound up third in there. But I said, you know what, if you're on the Tiz the Law bandwagon, and up in our area we are, Jack Knowlton and Sakatoga, they're kind of local favorites amongst those of us up here. And I think Tiz the Law, first time around 2 turns, sloppy track. You know, you would like to see him have gone through that hole aggressively and won the race, but I think it was, you know, for a young horse, only the third career start, that was a small hole and shied away a little bit. But I thought, and it seems like you think the same thing, if you were on the Tiz the Law bandwagon, stick on, because that was a performance maybe to build on in the year ahead.
Well, it certainly was. You know, one thing I like to see for a prospective Kentucky Derby contender is getting battle tested.
Yeah.
Because with the big field that you get in the Kentucky Derby, you know, if you go in there and you've dominated your opponent, it can get a little dicey in big traffic, or if you happen to break a little slow. You know, this is one of the things I think that really illustrated the greatness of Seattle's Blue, because he went into the Kentucky Derby undefeated and really untested and got left at the start in the Kentucky Derby. And that move he made through the stretch the first time is absolutely breathtaking. If you go back and check that race out on YouTube, I mean, it'll make your eyebrows go up, because you can't believe he ends up winning this race. And remember, he had to expend so much energy in the opening quarter to get into a tactical position that you would have thought his gas tank would have probably been going on empty toward the end of the race, and yet he won it. That's just one example of Seattle's Blues greatness. And so, like I say, I like to see for a 2-year-old at this time, or a 3-year-old once we turn the calendar, to get some experience, you know, get some to be battle tested to some extent. And another plus for Tiz the Law, Seth, is he raced on the track that is the venue for the Kentucky Derby. He also raced on a wet track. And boy, we have had a plethora of wet tracks for the Kentucky Derby in recent years. So there's a lot to come away from that Jockey Club, that Kentucky Jockey Club stakes that Tiz the Law to not get off his bandwagon, that's for sure. And I'm a huge fan of his trainer. I think Barkley Tagg is really just an outstanding conditioner, and so that's another plus for Tiz the Law. He could not be in better hands, in my opinion. And he's in the hands of someone who's shown he can win the Kentucky Derby, because, of course, Barkley Tagg did it with Funny Side.
Yeah, looking forward to it. I've been saying for the last few weeks, I think both the boys and the girls side, particularly the 2-year-old fillies this year, I think we have a lot to look forward to with the 2-year-old fillies turning 3 in less than a week, but also on the boys' side. I think it's going to be a fun trail to both the Oaks and the Derby. But let's jump in. Big day, kicking off the action out at Santa Anita for the winter season. There's a stake earlier on the card, a little ungraded stake, but I thought we'd kind of kick things up with the graded action that'll start in race number 5. There's an early post time out there. That means things will wrap up our time on the East Coast about 6:30. So I'm going to be in here for my handicapping show in the afternoon, and usually I wrap up around 4 or 4:30, but I'm going to stick around tomorrow for the great stakes card at Santa Anita. And the graded action kicks off in race number 5, the San Antonio. Nice field in here. John, I pulled up the big cap from back in April. Number 4 will be Gift Box, winning over number 1 McKinsey. Gift Box is back in, hasn't been seen since the 4th place finish in the Stephen Foster. But Giftbox, clearly a horse for a course out there at Santa Anita. He's been a new animal since he was transferred out to Southern California. But draft pick looks maybe a little bit interesting for Peter Urton. John Sheriff's with midcourt, I think, is very, very interesting, stepping out of a win in the Native Diver over at Del Mar last time. What are your thoughts on the San Antonio?
Well, I think certainly the race goes through Giftbox, even though he is coming off a layoff. But the reports in terms of what he's been doing in the morning have been glowing. So it looks like he has trained splendidly up to his comeback race here. You get Joel Rosario, who is familiar with the son of Twirling Candy, having ridden him in his last 4 starts, including that victory in the Santa Anita Handicap. So I think it's all systems go for Giftbox in this spot. You mentioned midcourt. There's a lot of people that are really getting high on midcourt, understandably so. He's an up-and-comer for sure. Just look at his Beyer speed figure pattern. He won a maiden race last June, got an 80, then he jumped up to an 89, then he jumped up to a 95, and last time out at the Grade 3 Native Diver, which was his first try in a graded stakes race, he got a 100 Beyer. So his Beyers are climbing. Now, this is where it's interesting to me. I'm a big Thoroughgraph fan, and if you go by the Thoroughgraph, I think it's going to be a little bit of a taller order for midcourt than if you're just a Beyer speed figure fan, because Giftbox has been rattling off negative Thoroughgraph numbers, and for the Thoroughgraph, the lower the number, the better. And Giftbox has rattled off 5 consecutive negative Thoroughgraph figures. So midcourt, he has never been in negative territory. So there's a bit of a gap here in terms of the Thoroughgraph power between the two. So that's one reason, if you ask me personally, I think Giftbox looks very solid in this spot. But I made them 9-5 and 2-1. I made Giftbox 9-5 on the morning line, midcourt 2-1. So there's really no separation between them there in terms of the odds, because I think midcourt is going to get a lot of respect from the bettors. I really get this feeling that there's a fan club kind of brewing for him. Gray Magician is kind of interesting in this spot, I thought, too. This is a pretty talented runner. And he's got Javier Castellano, and he seems to have trained well into this race. He's a 3-year-old that'll be turning 4, so I think there's still room for him to improve and mature. And so he's kind of a bit of a wild card in this race that could maybe give the big two, Giftbox and midcourt, a run for their money. But then there's an intriguing horse in here for a very high percentage trainer, Jonathan Wong, and that is Megahertz. Megahertz has rattled off quite a winning streak up in Northern California, and he's been improving steadily and comes off the biggest win of his career, the Grade 3 Berkeley Handicap on the synthetic surface at Golden Gate. You know, when a horse gets really good like this, you're not sure where it's going to end, where they're going to peak, and so that's kind of an interesting runner, and it's really a pretty intriguing race. You mentioned draft pick. You know what? Look at the competition he's kept in his career. The likes of Higher Power and Catalina Cruiser and Tom's Detente last time out in the Clark, a Grade 1 race. But Draft Pick ran respectably in that race, finishing 4th. Plus, Draft Pick has got 3 wins from 7 starts on the Santa Anita main track. So a win by him wouldn't exactly shock me in this race either. So for a relatively small field of 7, it's an intriguing race.
Yeah, and bodes well for the future of that handicap division out in Southern California, too, because we have Giftbox as a 6-year-old, King Abner as a 5-year-old. But as you said, Gray Magician 3, so a lot of potential there. And the rest of them are 4-year-olds. And midcourt, a pretty lightly raced, relatively speaking, 4-year-olds. So I think there's a lot of potential there, as they say, moving forward as well. Let's move on to the American Oaks. This is for the 3-year-olds. The 3-year-old fillies, obviously, being the Oaks name. American Oaks Grade 1 event, $300,000 up for grabs, 1.25 miles. And, John, I'd written at the top of my page, competitive, because I don't think anybody really stands out here. I pulled up the Valley View from Keeneland back in the middle of October in a big field, a 14-horse field. It'll be number 12, Lady Prancelot, getting it done under Joe Bravo. He's scheduled to be back on board again on Saturday. So Lady Prancelot on the number last time, and the performance attracted a little bit of attention from me. But Apache Princess, Mucho Unusual, Giza Goddess is interesting, and on the outside, Vibrance for Mike McCarthy. As I say, I think the American Oaks, a very competitive race this year. Your thoughts?
I agree with you, Seth. I think that's a good word for it, competitive. I will say I think Lady Prancelant will go favorite. I made her the 2-1 favorite, and if she runs back to her Valley View, that performance, I think, would be sufficient to get the job done here. But that's a big if. She's got to run back to that race. I did also like her effort at the Del Mar Oaks. She was 15-1 that day, far back early in a big field, came flying late to finish third, and was a respectable third behind a very talented filly who won the race, Gambier Park. So those two race performances. And one way I tend to look at a race oftentimes is if every horse in the race ran their best race, who would win the race? And to me, that question can be answered in this race, and that would be Lady Prancelant. But as I say, she's got to bring her A game, and if she doesn't, then, boy, you've got candidates up and down the line here that are capable of winning this race. Another tricky aspect of this race is the distance, 1.25 miles. We just don't have races of that length in the United States much anymore, and so it's asking these 3-year-old fillies a fairly tall order. That's one thing that helps the Vibrance, is she's coming out of a longer distance race, 1.38 miles, the Grade 3 red carpet handicap, and she's a consistent sort, so she's certainly got the credentials here to be a major player. Plus, Amir Cedillo has just burst on the scene here in Southern California after moving down from Northern California, and boy, this kid is just absolutely a tremendous talent. So I think you've got to give an extra look to everything he rides. A very good race, but I certainly think the one to beat here is Lady Prancelant. If you said you've got to pick the winner of this race or you die, I got to sink or swim with Lady Prancelant and hold my breath and hope for the best.
You mentioned she ran third in the Del Mar Oaks behind Gambier Park, of course, a Chad Brown horse. And with horses like Gambier Park and Newspaper Record and whatnot, everybody out in Southern California breathing a sigh of relief that Chad Brown doesn't show up with a 3-year-old filly on the turf, although he does have a nice horse a little bit later on the card in here. All right, let's turn our attention to the La Brea. Again, the 3-year-old fillies, this time on the main track, Grade 1 event, sprinting 7 furlongs. And I had to pull up just because it's going to be fun to watch again. Breeders' Cup Filly and Mayor Sprint. It's going to be Covfefe and the number 1 horse, and running second to number 6, Bellafina. Boy, you never like a defeat, but a defeat to the Covfefe is still a pretty good feather in your cap because she was just a monster this year and likely to wind up with the Eclipse in that division. So the close-up second-place finish in the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mayor Sprint looks good for Bellafina coming into Saturday, but nice improving numbers for Bell's the 1. Bob Baffert has Mother, who probably has to step it up, but certainly has shown some talent throughout the career. John Sheriff's with Hard Not to Love in here. First Star, lightly raced, a Ron Ellis runner that was 2 for 2 in the first couple of starts in the career and then stepped into Graded Stakes Company at Keeneland and ran second last time out. So again, being lightly raced, First Star, a little bit interesting as well. Your thoughts on La Brea?
Well, this is where it's informative to often check out Brad Free at Daily Racing Form because I think more than just about any public handicapper, he does so much work and comes up with such interesting statistics for races. And he pointed out that the record of the favorites in the last 20 years of La Brea leaves a lot to be desired. So that would make one give pause with Bellafina here. But I got to feel like he's been going against the grain of that in terms of how many chalk runners have not got the job done in this race in the last couple of decades. Boy, to me, I think she can regress off that Breeders' Cup race and handle this bunch, quite frankly. And something that I think is very relevant with Bellafina is her record on the main track at Sant Anita. She's raced 5 times on the main track at Sant Anita, and her only defeat was maybe the best race of her life. It was certainly the best race of her life by far from a Buyer speed figure standpoint, and also the best race of her life from a thoroughbred standpoint. That was the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint. And look, if you can give Covfefe that good of a run, wow to me. Giuseppe is a very special filly. That race she ran in the Miss Preakness was absolutely spectacular. She broke the track record that day, got a 107 buyer, and then she came back and duplicated that effort at Churchill Downs later in the year, getting another 107. So she's just the real deal and proved that, Giuseppe's in line for maybe a couple of Eclipse Awards. She's certainly the favorite for an Eclipse Award as the champion filly or mare sprinter, but she's also a female sprinter, I should say, but she's also in the running for an Eclipse Award as champion 3-year-old filly, and I think she's actually got a pretty darn good shot to get it. So, that Delafina with her record at Santa Anita coming off that last race, look, I'm amused at kind of looking at how many people are trying to go against Delafina in this race. And look, I know people are looking for value and trying to be favorites, but as I say, for whatever reason, favorites have not done well in this race, the La Brea. But, when they're saying maybe she'll bounce off the Breeders' Cup. Well, the Breeders' Cup wasn't like last week or 2 weeks ago. Simon Callahan is a very sharp trainer. He's aware of what a taxing effort that was for Delafina, and he gave her plenty of time to recuperate and recharge, her batteries off of that race. And her workouts have been outstanding recently coming into this race. So I think she's sitting on go. She's going to be very tough, and I'll be very surprised if she gets beat. I'm interested that there's some support for Mother. Look, it is Bob Baffert, it is Joel Rosario, so I get it from that standpoint. But if you give any credence to Buyer Street Figures or Thoroughgraph, Mother's going to have to really improve off anything she's done so far. Bradbury, who picked Mother, pointed out that really the best race of her life, quite likely, was her career debut, so that proves she runs well fresh. But my problem is that if she runs even better than she did in her career debut, I still question whether it's good enough to beat Delafina. You mentioned Seth Bell's the one, and I think she is certainly someone to respect in this spot. And for one reason is the fact that they're sending her out here. It's not easy to ship horses from the Midwest like this, from the fairgrounds. It can get very hard. And the fact that they are willing to do that and get her out here, it says a lot to me. It says how well she's doing physically and how well she's training. And that Raven run was a terrific effort. So she deserves respect. And you mentioned First Star as well. Look, she's in excellent hands with trainer Ron Ellis. She'll have to deal with that inside post position. But this is a lightly raced filly with a big upside here, I think. She won her first couple of races, and then they thought enough of her to send her to Keeneland for the Grade 2 Raven run with just 2 races under her belt. And she certainly gave a good account of herself there, finishing second to Bell's the One. So, to me, those are the biggest players in here. Hard Not to Love is someone that should not be ignored. She's a one-eyed filly, so that's kind of interesting. Seth, I go back, the very first one-eyed horse I was ever familiar with was a horse up in the Pacific Northwest where I grew up, started going to the races. And at the track of my hometown, Playfair Racecourse, we had a horse called Uncle Georgia who won the Playfair Mile in the late 1960s. And he was a one-eyed horse, and he was the first one I was ever familiar with. So this is a filly with an excellent trainer in John Sheriffs and a Hall of Fame jockey in Mike Smith, so certainly you can't ignore her. But, boy, I just think Delafina looks very, very, very good in this spot.
Yeah, and a win by her further flatters Covfefe for, as you say, potentially a couple of Eclipse Awards out there. All right, let's move on to the Bobby Frankel. Race number 8 on the card Saturday afternoon at Santa Anita. Fillies and Mayors, 3-year-olds and up, going a mile and an eighth. I pulled up the replay from the Rodeo Drive back on September 28th. It will be the number 1 Mirth winning. Mirth, that was 2 races back, followed this one up by running off the board in the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Turf after having been in the lead for much of the race. Just got caught late, but again, that's always a salty event, certainly. Going back to the race we're going to look at, the Rodeo Drive, shown a nice affinity for the Santa Anita Turf Strip in a Grade 1 event in the Rodeo Drive. So to me, she maybe stands out a little bit. But Curlin's Journey comes in good and perhaps improving form based on the numbers. Harmless, a good win against optional claimers last time. Tiny Tina, excellent Sunset. Both maybe have to step it up, but I think have the potential to maybe get that done. We will see. But as I say, it kind of, to me, goes through mirth. What are your thoughts on the Bobby Frankel?
Well, I agree with you, Seth, in terms of going through birth. When I made the 5-2 favorite, she could go shorter than that. But what kind of tied my hands on not making her a shorter price was I just didn't want to jump up the prices on some of these others to balance your race when you make a morning line. And, you know, there's a big difference between 6-1 and 8-1 in terms of the perception of horses. If you make a horse 6-1 and they get bet down to 4-1 and win, that doesn't look too bad. If you make them 8-1 and they get bet down to 4-1 and win, that looks not too good. So a lot of these, I just didn't want to go up to 8 on some of these. But I have picked up the Tiny Tina's, Curlin's Journey, and Harmless, and that kind of forced my hand at the other end of the equation on Mirth to not make her lower than 5-2. You're showing the Rodeo Drive. A key here is the Rodeo Drive, a Grade 1 race at a mile and a quarter, and then you mentioned the Breeders' Cup Filly Mare Turf. That's a Grade 1 race at a mile and a quarter. So a big plus from Mirth here is cutting back in distance to a mile and an 8. So, and especially with the way her running style, you know, when you consider where she was in that Breeders' Cup race at a mile and an 8, she was in front at the 8 pole. So, and that was against the likes of Iridessa, Basilica, and Sister Charlie. And I thought, even though Mirth finished 5th in that race, it's a credible 5th because she only got beat 5 3/4 lengths against some of the best filly and mare grass runners in the world. So it is definitely Mirth the one to beat in this spot. And once you get past Mirth, I really think it is wide open there. Excellent Sunset, I think, is one to consider. She's in good form. Richard Baltus has had just a terrific year. You know, this guy, his operation continues to get stronger and stronger and stronger, and you get Joel Rosario here. Look, one thing about Joel Rosario, Seth, this is a guy that can get really hot, especially here at Santa Anita. I've seen him have a day where, like, you come away from opening day, this 11-race card, and Rosario's got 4 or 5 wins when the card is over. So you want to really not overlook Joel Rosario in any situation, and this is the type of race he could certainly get the job done. You mentioned the name of the race, the Robert J. Frankel. Well, I knew Bobby Frankel quite well going back to when I first came to Southern California in 1981. He was a tremendous character, one of the smartest guys I've ever been around. And I just wish we in racing would not wait always, or almost always, I should say, until people pass away to honor them. I think of like the Bob Fortas stake that's coming up, that they have at the fairgrounds in New Orleans. You know, it would have meant so much to Bob Fortas at that race that they come up with that name before he passed away. Yeah. Now he's gone, and it's like, we wait until the Bobby Frankels and so forth, these people pass away, then we honor them. Once in a while, racing's ahead of the curve. We have the Lucas Classic at Churchill, and I was very pleased when New York did come up with the Joe Hirsch Classic before the great Joe Hirsch passed away. But I wish racing would, get its act together a little more and be more ahead of the curve than behind the curve with the naming of these races.
Yeah, well said, because that gives us all a chance to kind of reflect and honor and applaud the people when they can appreciate it. So I think you're right on the money. All right, the 9th, annually one of the last big Grade 1 for 3-year-olds during the year. Some years it can potentially play into the Eclipse Awards. Omaha Beach has that potential, except I think Maximum Security kind of sealed the deal with the Cigar Mile win, but certainly it's going to be fun to see what Omaha Beach can do in this race. It's a short field. It clearly is Omaha Beach's to lose. We're going to pull up the Santa Anita Sprint Championship from October 5th. Number 2 will be Omaha Beach. And again, it's another one of those races I pulled up. He ran a good second in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile, and I thought about pulling that up, but I thought, let's see one more time the end of the year. What will go down as one of the better races of the year is Omaha Beach and Chancelot kind of throw it down coming down the stretch in the Santa Anita Sprint Championship. Number 2, Omaha Beach gets it by a head. Chancelot, the number 3, runs second. Again, showing that Omaha Beach has an affinity for this course as well. So it looks like, as I say, it's Omaha Beach's race to lose on Saturday. But complexity from Chad Brown, maybe a little bit interesting off the triple-digit buyer last time, off a little bit of a layoff. Only a couple of starts this year, but that last was a nice win. And just that Chad and Klarovich elect to send the horse out and give this a try attracted some attention from me. But what are your thoughts on the Malibu?
Well, I don't know if there's a bigger Omaha Beach fan in the world than yours truly. I got on his bandwagon off his maiden win in the slop in February, and I just thought that was a sensational performance that day. He opened up a 10-length lead coming into the stretch and won by 9, and he became my Kentucky Derby horse off of that. Frank Miramonte, the track announcer at Sant Anita, who I'm good friends with, basically told me I was smoking my socks to be that high on Omaha Beach at that point in his career. And so when Omaha Beach came back and won the division of the Rebel beating game winner, the Eclipse Award winner, and then when Omaha Beach came back and won the Arkansas Derby, beating Improbables, who ended up going off as the betting favorite in the Kentucky Derby when Omaha Beach was withdrawn because of the intrepid epiglottis. Certainly Frank Miramonte says, boy, I was wrong, you were right. And, so it's great satisfaction for me to have been proven right. But, I'm left a little empty because of the fact that Omaha Beach didn't get to run in any of the Triple Crown races or even the Travers. I think he just could have had such a outstanding 3-year-old campaign. But you showed that Santa Anita Sprint Championship, and this is another sign of just how much talent this colt has. Because, man, oh, man, off a layoff to beat Chancelot going 6 furlongs, that is just a tremendous performance on the part of Omaha Beach.
And coming up the rail to do it.
That's right. And then, yes, he got beat in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. But look, Fun to Run is not chopped liver. Fun to Run came back and did finish second in the Cigar Mile, and it was coming off the big win at Park. Omaha Beach didn't break all that sharply in the Breeders' Cup, and that was a funny racetrack we had the Breeders' Cup on at Santa Anita this year. There's no question about it. Seth, the track was listed as fast, but really, if you think about it, it played kind of like an off-track because of how deep and tiring it was.
Yeah.
And the way the horses were spread out. To me, Midnight Bazoo ran a tremendous race just to finish second, trying to come from as far back as she did. You really couldn't close ground to win races from far back on that track the way it played those 2 days. So Omaha Beach, to me, really did not lose much luster at all in being defeated in the Breeders' Cup. Plus, don't forget, he was coming back quickly off a huge effort to defeat Chancelot. I mean, I think there's no question he regressed or bounced a little bit in that race. So I think he showed his class to actually finish second in that race. He's just trained lights out for the Malibu. This 34 flat drill, that's a phone trick type drill. For those of you long in the tooth, you may remember the just very talented runner that Dick Mandela trained called Phone Trick. And Omaha Beach kind of looked like Phone Trick the other morning when he zipped that 3 furlongs and 34 flat. So he's going to be a heavy favorite. I made him 4-5. He's the shortest price morning line favorite of all 11 races on the opening day card, and he's going to be extremely hard to beat. Now, all that said, you mentioned complexity, Seth. He is an intriguing runner in here, and the fact that Chad Brown has targeted this race for quite a while, and that comeback effort by Complexity showed that maybe he's back on the beam. I thought he showed so much in that Champagne, and then things just kind of fell apart for him. But, boy, that was a terrific comeback for him. So he's very dangerous against Omaha Beach. And then Roadster is, what do you do with Roadster?
Yeah.
Everybody was so high on him earlier this year when he won the Santa Anita Derby, and then he ran a clunker in the Kentucky Derby, and he was a disappointment in the summer. But look, his race in the Damascus at 7 furlongs against a very good sprinter, Flagstaff. To me, that says you better not exactly throw him out the window in this race for sure. Bob Baffert said that off of the clunker and the native diver, they went over him physically and they put blood on him, and his blood test came back and showed it wasn't quite up to snuff. So he might have had a bit of a bug in that race, and that would make sense because he was dull that day. So, the fact that Baffert's running him in this race against Omaha Beach says something to me, because Bob Baffert watches Omaha Beach and knows Omaha Beach, knows it's not going to be easy to beat him, and he could have looked for a different spot for Roadster. So the fact Roadster's even in this race, I think, makes them something, and you're going to get a decent price. Out of respect, I made Roadster 3, that on some other lines I've seen people are making him 5 and 6 to 1, and maybe he will lift up to that off of the bad race in the native diver. But like I say, if you could get 5 or 6 to 1 on Roadster, as big a fan as I am of Omaha Beach, he would be the value bet in the race and would make sense from somebody trying to cash a bet on a horse at a good price.
Yeah, I think Omaha Beach is going to take a lot of action and maybe be a single for a lot of people on pick bets. Deservedly so. You kind of alluded to it. A little bit of a lost 3-year-old season. Yeah, the Rebel in the Arkansas Derby, but misses the Triple Crown and the big summer races. Otherwise, this horse may be vying for that 3-year-old eclipse, but sitting on the potential of a very nice beginning to a handicap season out there in Southern California.
It's just too bad, Seth. It's just too bad. I was really hoping that they would change their mind and not have him go to stud next year after the Pegasus World Cup at Gulfstream, and say, well, we're going to run him one more year to let him show what he can do. And I actually asked Richard Mandela about that a month or so ago, hoping that maybe the door was just cracked open a little bit, and he shook his head and said, no, it's a done deal, and he's definitely going to stud after the Pegasus. So,
I was kind of like you, thinking it's easy to say, but when you're sitting on that, I was thinking the potential may be there to change them, but they're definite there, right?
Yeah, they're definite there. So it's kind of a shame because oftentimes you're really not getting into what a horse is at their best until they're full. Remember Seattle's Flu? People were kind of down on him. In terms of, even though he was the Triple Crown winner, they said, well, he never really beat anything. Well, he showed what he really was as a 4-year-old. You think of Affirmed as a 4-year-old. You think of Spectacular Bid as a 4-year-old. So
my favorite horse, Forgo.
And people forget that ran, fourth in the Kentucky Derby against Secretariat, but turned into one of the great geldings of all time. And think of Gunrunner. Here's another one, So that Omaha Beach, we were just kind of scratching the surface to me on what maybe he could do this year, and he, like you say, unfortunately missed most of the year. So I thought it would have enhanced his stud value if he'd come back and had a gun runner type 4-year-old campaign. But unfortunately, it's just not in the cards.
All right, let's wrap things up. Your time about 3:30 on Saturday. Our time about 6:30. The 10th and final at Santa Anita. The Mathers Brothers Mile. We had the 3-year-old fillies a little early in the American Oaks. The 3-year-old males, though, in the Mathers Brothers Mile. Grade 2 event, mile on the grass, as the name indicates. We have a couple of European invaders. You always have to pay attention to them in races like this. Originaire is maybe a little bit interesting. Kingly for Bob Baffert, a potential player in here. Proud Pedro. But I pulled up the Hollywood Derby from November 30th. The 1-2 finishers come back. Mo Forza, the number 1 horse. Number 5, Neptune Storm, coming back as well. And it looks like coming out of that 1-2 finish in the Hollywood Derby, they are both in a good position on Saturday afternoon. Your thoughts in the Mathis Brothers Mile?
And by the way, one more horse just recently that got so much better after his 3-year-old campaign was California Chrome.
Absolutely.
Kentucky Derby and Preakness as a 3-year-old, but not only came back and did well at 4, but especially as a 5-year-old. So that's again why I'm disappointed that Omaha Beach actually is going to stud. More Forza. Now here's a situation where it behooves the morning line maker like myself to really pay attention not only to what happens in a race, but to the betting in a race. And I was really surprised before they went into the starting gate for the Hollywood Derby that Mo Forza was bet as strongly as he was. I could see him going favored, but boy, he was 5-2 in a big field, a field of 12, and against a brigade from Chad Brown again. And that really said a lot to me how the betting public has climbed aboard Mo Forza. They certainly believed what he did in the Twilight Derby. Look at how the dramatic change in his odds from in those two races. In the Twilight Derby, he was 18-1. And on the strength of what he did in the Twilight Derby, he goes off at 5-2 in a 12-horse field. And he ran like a favorite should to get the job done in that Hollywood Derby. So I've lowered him from that 5-2 Hollywood Derby price to 9-5 in this race. I think he is a strong, he looks very tough in here. And if he runs back to his Hollywood Derby, you have to think he'll probably be posing for pictures again after the race. Now, Neptune Spoon, I kept trying to make 5-2, but then I kept looking at how he was bet in that Hollywood Derby. And while Mo Forza was 5-2, Neptune Spoon was 5-1. And it wasn't like, Neptune Spoon got embarrassed in the Twilight Derby. He finished third, lost by only 2 lengths to Mo Forza. But boy, the people were so much more strongly, the bettors on Mo Forza in that Hollywood Derby than Neptune Spoon. So Neptune Spoon, I made 3-1 instead of 5-2. I think he'll come down from his 5-1 in the Hollywood Derby because he was right there with Mo Forza, beating only 3/4 of a length. And I think he is certainly one capable of turning the tables on Mo Forza here. It wouldn't surprise me. But I have to go with Mo Forza. I've kind of been high on him ever since they ran him against winners as a maiden at Del Mar in late August, and he almost won that race. You don't see that very often. A maiden against winners, and then the maiden almost beating the winners. And then he came back at Santa Anita in the fall.
It sounds like we lost John, but he was kind of wrapping up there, as it were. And so we will wrap up because our time is almost up anyway. Always appreciate talking to John White from Santa Anita. Again, I think the phone cut out, but we were right at the end of the interview anyway, and got a good look at the stakes action out at Santa Anita. 6 stakes we talked about, but there's also another ungraded stake earlier on the card as well. And again, on OTB Live on Saturday afternoon, I will extend out and include those Santa Anita Stakes races on their opening day, and we'll go a little bit later on Saturday afternoon for OTB Live. So again, we thank John White for his thoughts on the opening day card at Santa Anita.
You're watching Capital OTB TV. Wager at CapitalOTBBet.com for the most comprehensive wagering site and the best player rewards in New York State.